Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. On today's solo episode, I'm talking about how to practice intentionally nourishing our bodies while we're traveling and on the go. I am presently in the thick of this practice as I am about a week into a three and a half, 4 month abroad journey, and in a lot of transition space in terms of place and space and country and travel amid all of the delectable delights that are so tantalizing, all the pastries, all the yummy drinks and desserts and everything. I want to feel good. And so today we're going to talk about all the things, not only like tips and tricks of how to train your attention to focus on what is actually going to nourish you, but also thinking about creating intentional mealtime rituals that help ground you so you can be more present as you nourish your body, especially while on the go. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Now, let's be real. We can't feel good all of the time. I don't think it's realistic to put that pressure on ourselves when it comes to nourishing and fueling our body with food that gives us energy, where we feel vitality, where we feel so hydrated and balanced and like all of the things. It's really hard to feel that way 24/7. And I think we need to be careful because even though we don't want to feel like shit throughout our day, it can trigger that inner perfectionism that you have to eat so perfectly and so precisely and so well timed to feel your ultimate best. And if we live in that space, in my personal opinion, we're not really living and we're not really able to enjoy because we're so wrapped up in trying to control what actually goes into our body. And I used to eat like this. Like I remember in college, I would get so anxious and tight thinking about meal planning and my food and how many calories I was going to eat. And not that I was necessarily counting calories, but I just had this strict eating regimen that, felt simple and doable and was helpful in the sense of, meal prepping and staying in budget, but it didn't allow me to live. And it kept my body in repeat. Like I was only eating this certain amount of vegetables, the same thing like broccoli every day and carrots, which they're great for you, but your body needs a variety of nutrients. And I'd get so anxious thinking about that next meal and trying to control it while I'm eating the present meal that I'm not living. I'm so wrapped up into just this fear and trying to control the fear by planning. So if you have your own relationship to fuel and nourishment where it's tight and constricted and you don't enjoy that, I welcome you to see if you can practice, and again, practice here, softening and trusting your body instead of fear and control. Now, when we add traveling into the mix, it creates this whole other unpredictable element when it comes to fuel and nourishing our bodies. When I say the word nourish, to just define it here, it's really about how do we care and hydrate and give our body the nutrients it needs to thrive from the inside out. And in order for the body to thrive from the inside out, we have to be conscious about what we put into it. When we're traveling, we don't have our kitchen, we don't have all of our supplies, we don't have all of our things, we don't have our local supermarkets where we can count the exact ingredients we want, or the favorite places we know we can pick up from or order in from that taste and feel really good in our bodies. When we travel, everything is a big question mark. It's an unknown. And for some, that might feel really fun and like an adventure. And for others, that might cause anxiety. And for others, it might be just neutral. I'm going to share some tips and ways to think about how to nourish your body when you're staying at a hotel and don't have access to a kitchen. And then also share some of my favorite ways to fuel my body when I do have a kitchen, but maybe limited supplies. So, for the first week of this trip, we were staying in a hotel that had breakfast included. And, the breakfast included was a buffet, and it was a pretty, decent buffet. There weren't, sadly, any vegetables, and the fruit was sort of limited. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get to buffets, sometimes it is so overwhelming because I want to try everything because I love food so much that I'm just curious about it all. And if I try everything, I'm normally getting kind of like tapas style little bites of things here and there, which then typically leads at the end to not feeling satisfied. And so then I feel like I go round two and find something that I like and that I want more of. And I'm then really full and I'm like, what did I just eat? So that happens to you. No, you are not alone. And there's some strategies of how to manage the buffet in a little bit more mindful way. So first off, I give myself permission to try everything because I am very anti-restricting. I don't think a lot of good comes from being super tight and restrictive. As I go around the buffet, I start to pay attention to my senses and notice, what is catching my eye? What looks good to my eye? Maybe it's something colorful or something chocolatey or something crispy or buttery. And then what starts to look good for my mouth? What is my mouth craving? What kind of texture? And then I ask my belly, like, what does my stomach actually want right now? What does my body feel like it needs right now? Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's actually craving a lot of protein or it needs some protein or, it wants something lighter, maybe like yogurt or I'm craving a sandwich and this bread looks really good, right? Like there's a layer when paying attention, I can learn to listen to what my body actually is hungry for and learning how to discern is just my mouth? Is it just my eyes? Is it my fingers? Or is it my actual stomach that wants whatever I'm wanting? And I'll be honest, sometimes I don't know. And maybe the senses in my eyes or my fingers are so much more powerful that I let them pick what goes on my plate. But then I listen to my body with every bite. Is that actually what you want to eat right now? As I'm doing this, I try to have fun with it. It's not tight. It's not restrictive. I don't put on blinders and need to put myself in a corner and be like, I need to get this meal right, quote unquote. Instead, it's playful. It's about really loving my body enough to listen. And sometimes I listen incorrectly. Sometimes I don't actually get to meet the needs of my body when it comes to fueling myself. To be honest, that used to spiral me into a lot of anxiety and I would ruminate, oh, why did I make that choice? And and just spiral myself out. Would not only create so much unnecessary stress for me in the moment, but it would put me in a bad mood where I would just be irritable with my husband, with whoever I was around, and get shut down. So, a huge lesson I've learned over the years is to have a lot of self compassion for the choices that I make when it comes to fueling my body. That I'm doing the best I can to listen to her if that's truly my intention. And sometimes I'm going to listen and serve her well. And sometimes I'm going to miss the mark. And sometimes I'm just going to do okay. Learning to accept whatever happened in that moment, whatever choices were made in that moment is part of the practice, right? This is where our mindfulness muscles can really support us is accepting, yep, that just happened. I just made that choice. And can I be really kind to myself around it? Now, when you're traveling without a kitchen, whether it's for work or pleasure or both, sort of how my husband and I are doing it right now, the timing is off. So I don't necessarily have breakfast at 7, 8 a.m. and have lunch at noon and have dinner at 6 p.m. and have my snacks. Sometimes breakfast is really big and then we don't end up eating a lunch and then we have a bigger dinner. Or sometimes breakfast is really small and then we have a big lunch and then we have a tiny dinner, right? It's just fluid. Learning to listen to myself of how hungry am I, learning how to listen and pay attention to hunger cues is really important. I am somebody who gets hangry, can ask my husband. And when that happens, it's not fun for either of us. And so trying to pay attention to hunger before it attacks anybody is really helpful. And when we're traveling and on the go or running around from this meeting to that meeting or stimulated because you're doing something new, it's really common that our attention is not on our bodies. It's out in the outside world. That's where I'm partly here to remind us that as we are walking down the street or sitting in a meeting or on a Zoom call where we're listening in our external environment, we can also bring our attention internally and check in with ourselves and notice, what are my needs right now? Am I feeling sleepy or hungry or thirsty? 3 mindful moments I like to offer myself while out and about traveling and trying to pay attention to nourishing my body. The first one, and honestly, this is probably the most important one, is to hydrate. Hydrate, 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 hydrate. Somehow I find this so much more challenging when being abroad or on the go, even though I have a water bottle and I try to keep it filled with me, whether it's that the water tastes differently or I'm overly stimulated and I'm not paying attention. I don't know what it is, but I find it really hard to feel fully hydrated. And I notice when I do those days that something shifts and I'm able to pay attention to drinking more water, I feel so much better. I also think since not having a kitchen and I'm eating more of my meals out and about, it's saltier. And so I think I'm just naturally a little bit more inflamed than I am if I was cooking most of my meals in my own kitchen. So, in order to counteract all of that salty goodness, I think I'm like needing to hydrate even more than I normally am. The second practice that supports me feeling better when I don't have my own kitchen is to order the veggie heavy option wherever I am. And I don't mean that if I'm craving a burger, I force myself to get the salad because that's more veggie heavy. Like I try again, number one is to listen to my body, let my body tell me what it's craving. But whatever I do order, I really try to emphasize getting as much vegetables in. So maybe subbing a salad instead of fries, maybe ordering a side of broccoli rabe, maybe getting extra veggies in that pasta dish. Whatever it is, I try to really beef up on vegetables. Vegetables of all kinds are like nature's vitamins. And if I am traveling and want to stay pretty regular, if you know what I'm talking about, I want to have a lot of fiber, I want to have a lot of nutrients and be as hydrated as possible. The third practice here ties to portion control. And for me, when I am eating out for like a week straight, a week ends up being my limit. Going past 7 days of not having a kitchen starts to feel too much for my body. And when I say too much, what happens for me is I start to lose interest in food. Eating out starts to make me feel a little nauseous. Like it's just kind of, I lose my appetite, and that's not good for anybody. So one of the practices that supports me here is to pay attention to portion control. So maybe that's my husband and I split a main and we get an extra side or appetizer, something again that's more veggie heavy. Strategy supports me feeling full and nourished without feeling overly indulgent. Instead, there feels like there's more balance to our meals as well as our bank account. Well, this brings me to some of my favorite nourishing tips while having a kitchen and playing with the balance of eating out and exploring local food, as well as cooking with local food and nourishing my body. So, when I finally do have access to a kitchen, I love, love, love exploring local ingredients and having fun checking out their vegetables and what kind of pastas or grains do they have or sauces. Remember in Portugal when I went a few years ago, I got a salad mix and loved how their salad bag of salad mix had arugula in it, and it had shredded beets and carrots, cress, and it just like had this eclectic mix of greens that you don't typically find in a US supermarket. In Amsterdam, they have in the supermarket that I just bought, I'm going to make for dinner tonight, sweet potato buckwheat noodles. I mean, yum, how delicious. We're in our current place with a kitchen for only 2 nights, so I don't want to stock up on olive oil and all the things. So, to keep cooking really simple, I get a mix of pre made things and some things I'll make fresh. From an organic supermarket, I got a pre made soup as well as some sauteed tofu with teriyaki. And I'm going to mix the soup with the tofu, with the noodles, and then a bag of stir fried greens together. Also, since I'm craving veggies, got some kimchi to support our gut biomes as well as getting vegetables into our body. When I'm staying at a place with a kitchen for longer than 3 nights, it is definitely worth the investment to get olive oil, get eggs, like have enough things to make simple breakfasts or lunch or at least 2 meals a day so that I feel like I can enjoy eating out more instead of having a majority of my meals out. I just want to pause here. And if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this sounds really effing exhausting, like, why do I care and want to pay attention? Why don't I just grab things from the supermarket and eat them and snack on them and eat when I'm hungry and go out and just live my life? That is your strategy. Go for it. I know for me that when I don't feel good physically based on what I'm eating or not eating, it can throw my mood, my emotions, my ability to focus way off. I personally try to strike that balance of paying attention and also recognizing we're going to make choices that don't align with how we want to feel, and that's also okay because it happened and we didn't know, and we get to be really kind to ourselves and move on. Now, another mindful moment to offer yourself that I try to practice when nourishing my system while traveling is to practice a mealtime ritual. I've talked about this on the pod before, but having a mealtime ritual is a really helpful way to bring our attention to the present moment so that we can actually pay attention to what we're about to eat. So, a mealtime ritual can be anything that brings you to the present moment before you take your first bite. So, for me, my mealtime ritual when I'm by myself or my feet are on the ground, I take a moment to feel my feet, look at the colors of the food in front of me. If it's warm, maybe feel the warmth or the temperature underneath my hands, take a moment to smell it, and then take that first bite. And if I'm really hungry or if I'm like in the midst of running around or waiting to board a plane or on a train or in an elevator trying to eat, it might be like a millisecond long of a ritual, but it's something that just shifts my attention to be like, yep, right now I am here about to eat. This is helpful not only for our attention, but it also activates our salivary glands. And so our body is getting ready to digest, or we're priming our system, we're getting the acid in our stomach ready, and it's very helpful. Research also talks about how it's stressful for our body for multitasking. And so if we just do one thing at a time, like eating versus eating and sending emails, eating and watching TV, eating and walking down the street, If we just pay attention to eating, we are then able to also understand what our body wants and when it's full, when it's had enough. Now, there are also some products that people love to travel with because it supports them having some sort of routine or ritual with food, or their body is able to consistently get the nutrients that it needs, whether it's extra fiber or greens. Personally, I haven't found anything that I love and need to travel with no matter what, whether it's like a green powder mix or any of that stuff. I don't know. I haven't found something. So if you have something, let me know. If you're like, Wade, this is so good, I travel with it, reach out and let's share it with each other so that we can all learn more travel tips on how to stay well nourished. What I do travel with are needed hydration packages, which I should have mentioned earlier, but these are really helpful in supporting me having electrolytes and trying to stay hydrated while traveling. Try to eat as much real food as possible, especially while traveling. So, minimizing even how many bars I'm taking with me as snacks, and instead rely on nuts and seeds and creating my own little trail mix. As we bring this podcast episode to a close, I'd love to hear from you. What's resonating for you? What are some of your favorite ways to practice nourishing and fueling your body while traveling? Do you have go-to snacks and or products that you must travel with? If so, let me know. Do you have your own mealtime ritual, or are you inspired now to create your own? Feel free to share what comes up for you. I'd love to hear. Reach out to me on Instagram and let me know what resonated, or send me a message linked in the show notes. I will also link some resources in the show notes that you can check out to support you staying well nourished while traveling and on the go. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Center in the City podcast. It is such a pleasure and a gift to be able to connect to you in this way. I hope you found this episode insightful. If so, take a moment to share it with somebody in your community who you know travels and maybe struggles with or wants to be more intentional with how they care for their bodies. Until next time, stay centered.